Did you know that synagogues are supposed to have windows? Now, you might know this if you watched my video in the greeting yesterday, so the 5 of you who maybe watched it know this already. But for the rest of you, yes, synagogues are required to have windows. In the Talmud, we read that Rabbi Heath bar Abba said one should only pray in a house with windows. As it is stated in the book of Daniel, in his attic there were open windows facing Jerusalem. It may seem like sort of a quirky requirement of synagogue architecture, and the implications here are far greater than just providing for an adequate source of light, though light is certainly important in prayer. Indeed, the rationale given by Rabbi Heath is connected to Daniel, that he could see Jerusalem when he prayed, which elevated his prayers. Some of the commentary on this text suggests that a clear view of the heavens or a clear sight of nature might evoke a sense of awe. For that, you could see Rabbi Prosnit's sermon from last week. It was bussin'. Or a sense of smallness in the midst of our vast universe. But other commentators point to what happens when we have windows in our buildings. We look outside. Author Erica Brown recounts a story about the wife of Edward Hopper, the well-known American artist, who was once asked, what is the most difficult aspect of being married to a great artist? She replied, it took me a long time to realize that when he is looking out the window, he is working. The view outside inspires us, provokes us, invites us into an unknown that is generative. Prayer, by that token, should stimulate the same responses. In a tour of the Beth Am campus, curated many years ago by Rabbi Sidney Axelrod of blessed memory, he offers a similar sentiment when he recounts the discussions that went into the design of the sanctuary that we're sitting in now. He explains, I went down to Southern California to a chapel designed by Frank Lloyd Wright, and I sat in that chapel overlooking the Pacific with a colleague. As we sat in the chapel at dusk, you couldn't tell where the chapel left off and the foliage around the chapel began. It was a very spiritual moment. He said, that's the feeling I would like to have here at Beth Am. When I returned home, says Rabbi Axelrod, I became a supporter of our architect Goody Steinberg's vision of no walls in the sanctuary. It was so that we could symbolize, first of all, the temple going out into the community and the community coming into the temple. No separation. Also, we could closely identify with the beauty of nature, so much a part of Jewish tradition. Our tradition, although emphasizing the importance of the Torah, of the scrolls, of the written word, of study, has never failed to mention also the beauty of God's creation, the beauty of nature. Some thought it would be disconcerting to sit in a temple where you would be able to see out, where you'd be able to see trees and flowers. We felt it would only enhance the spirituality. The essence of this notion of prayer spacing having windows is that prayer can't exist in a vacuum. Our spiritual pursuits have to remain grounded in the world around us. On Yom Kippur, our Haftarah reading from the book of Isaiah asks, is this the fast I desire, a day to afflict body and soul? Is not this the fast I desire, to break the bonds of injustice and remove the heavy yoke, to let the oppressed go free and release all those who are enslaved? Isaiah reminds us that we cannot separate our spiritual lives from living out our values outside the walls of our synagogues. What we learn and do in here must inspire us to show up and act out there. As we celebrate the life and legacy of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. this weekend, and it's worth noting, he would have been 93 this year. He was born the same year, 1929, as Barbara Walters. It's an opportunity for many communities, including our Peninsula Jewish community, to engage in social justice work, inspired by the incredible work of Dr. King. Even though he moved the cause of civil rights and racial justice forward in innumerable ways, we, as a country and in our own communities, still have much work to do to realize his dream of peace and equality for all people, regardless of the color of their skin or the beliefs they hold. Indeed, we increasingly feel the enormity of the work yet to be done. Rabbi Axelrod, in reflecting on his involvement in the civil rights movement of the 60s, And one of his first encounters with Dr. King, shared in his memoir, an oral history, an interview with him done some years ago. He says, "I remember sitting down at lunch with Martin Luther King opposite me and listening as he enunciated some of the ideas that became part of the essence of his being. We want our freedom, all of our freedom. We don't want to wait another 100 years, he said. We want all of our freedom and we want it now." He repeated again and again, "It isn't the villains that are our main problem. It's the average person, the decent American who refuses to be involved." We live in a world today where hate is on the rise, and any actions, big or small, that we take on are part of combating that hatred and bringing healing into our fractured world. How will we get involved? In my office, I have a magnet with a quote from Dr. King, one that I bought near where he's buried in Atlanta during one of the civil rights journeys through the South that I've led over the last few years with our teens. He writes, "Faith is taking the first step, even when you don't see the whole staircase." A colleague of mine, when I worked in New Jersey, Rabbi Eric Wisnia, would often say to his students, "Prayer doesn't change things, prayer changes people, and changed people have the power to change things." In other words, when Jews pray, we don't just ask for things, requesting things from God. We pray in part to remind ourselves of our ability to exhibit the qualities we pray for. We don't just pray for shelter. We can be a source of shelter for others. We don't just pray for strength and healing. We can provide comfort and strength to those in need of healing. We don't just pray for peace. We search for ways to make peace possible and live more peaceful lives, create peaceful homes and communities. So as we pray tonight, we also look outside. We consider the ways in which our prayers tonight will inspire us to get to work. This weekend in particular, there are opportunities all around us, through our children's schools, through the OFJCC's Mitzvah Day, and other organizations, to find ways to volunteer and give back to our communities, to do the important work of social justice, to bring the work we do on ourselves in here, out there into our communities and the world. Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat Shalom.